when we first closed, the cops were there every day. The first employee we had, who was kind of a carryover employee, we're like, I don't know, she seems all right. Cops come in, they go to arrest her, she runs away. So we're like, what's going on? So there was homeless people sleeping in this property. There was something called the Cannabis Cabana, which is like this little ramshack shed outside in which the homeless people used to basically just sleep. And it was kind of like this 420 friendly hotel where people could go in and smoke in there. But really just like everyone was just lighting up in there, even all the employees. There was literally like so much weed being smoked at the property that some of that stuff was budding. We had weed plants growing up kind of back behind our building. I didn't even know this was possible.
Nobody's born incredible. People who do incredible things simply took the right steps. This is our journey. This is the hunt for incredible. Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Hunt for Incredible, where we tease out the mindsets and actions of people who have done incredible things so that you can apply it to your own life. On this episode, we have an absolute killer in the short-term rental / hospitality space. He's managed 180 STRs and then eventually pivoted to hotels. He's scaled up a short-term rental portfolio to 11 properties, and then in addition to that, purchased 2 hotels with 66 keys or units across all of them. We've got my man, Jordan Malara. Jordan, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Gideon. Super pumped to be here.
Yeah. So let's dive straight into the meat and potatoes. What was your journey like to build up that short-term rental portfolio? And then what crossed your mind that made you realize that you need to own and scale into commercial real estate?
Yeah. It was honestly pretty slow for me at first. I remember, I went to school, I got an engineering degree, kind of thought that's what I was going to do. My whole plan was to join the military, which I did kind of post-college. And then I was just kind of get that experience, and I was going to move into a management role within an engineering firm, and that was going to be my life. I thought that was like the dream. And then midway along, I was like, I'm kind of interested in this business thing. I got forced into a business class in college, and that kind of introduced me to the classic business books, Richest Man in Babylon, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And before I knew it, I was like, oh, this real estate thing is really fascinating. And so once we moved, we're out of Colorado Springs. So once we moved to Colorado Springs, we thought, let's buy a property and let's turn it into a rental in a year or two. And so 1 year to a date, we moved out of that property, moved into a duplex, rented out that first property. And that was kind of the start. Right from there, we realized like, oh, there's like huge potential in this. So we kind of stair-stepped, basically a year and a half in each property, and just built up a portfolio of about 11 short-term rentals. And at that point, we loved the short-term rental space, but it was getting pretty saturated in our market. And then kind of something happened a little bit along the way. I was in a skiing accident, probably should have died, ended up just breaking my back. But I was completely sidelined, bedridden for a couple months in a back brace. And that was right as I was about to do a bunch of my own renovations on a property. And so all of a sudden it was like, I can't just we're paying for this. I can't just let this property sit here. I need to hire somebody. So it forced me to hire somebody. And I'm so glad it did, because it helped me realize I can do way more if I'm not like this single person trying to do everything myself. And so it was at that moment that I was like, I think I'm going to leave the military. I'm just going to do real estate full time. So that was kind of the launching point, and I'll kind of pause there.
Hell yeah, that's awesome, man. The obstacle is the way. It's so easy to get frustrated about challenges and walls that we hit, but very often those walls will force us to adjust in a way where if we seize that opportunity properly, we can end up scaling into bigger and better things. It's all about leveraging that obstacle as being an advantage rather than a disadvantage. So super, super killer. I had a similar story with getting into commercial real estate where my wife became incredibly ill. We didn't know what was going on with her. It got so bad to the point where she was bedridden. Doctors had no idea what was going on. Within a 4-month period, my mom got a form of cancer with a 20% survival rate. My dad was rushed to the ER with heart failure, and they said he needs a heart transplant or he's going to die. So literally within a 4-month period, the 3 most important people in my life were seemingly at death's door with very low probability of survival. And it shifted my perspective to, rather than me buying real estate, I need to build a business that buys real estate and scales real estate so that if anything happens to me, like my loved ones will still be okay. Because you get hit with this painful realization that anything can happen to you. Like there's no reason, like especially males chemically, we're hardwired when we're younger, we feel invincible. And we feel like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be the one who dodges the bullet. I'm gonna be the one that makes it all the way to the end. And then you experience life and realize that there's no reason as to why it shouldn't be me that doesn't make it out or that gets sick and can't work. And that shift in perspective of needing to operate through people and build scaled systems so that if anything does happen to you, everyone else is okay, ends up being a massive advantage. And so that's awesome to hear you leveraging that opportunity to turn that obstacle into a catapult.
Yeah, and I want to go back to like that perspective thing because I think that plays out in so many different ways. I know, like, yeah, in that case, like I had to learn to have a good perspective, and maybe I've always been an optimist, but I will say, like, with any situation, like recently we had some like costs, almost double on a renovation, and the like it can force you to look a million different ways, but there's tons of benefit if you have the right perspective in something like that. Like it forced us in that moment to really dive in and say like, okay, what are the important things? It doesn't change what we want to do, but like having the right perspective can change like basically any situation. And I think that is really what separates successful people. It can get out of their emotional feeling of how bad something feels in a given moment because the situation didn't change, right? It still sucks, but you're growing a better perspective on like what could be the good in that situation or what could come from that in the end. I think it's really important that people always have good perspective, and it's not easy. Like I didn't want to break my back and have a great perspective on it. You didn't want all your family to go through all this big stuff, but you use that as a learning objective now, and like we use those things to form who we are. So I think that's huge.
Yeah, 100%. One of my favorite quotes is the difference between winners and losers is losers use their negative experiences as excuses as to why they can't move forward, and winners leverage their negative experiences to develop strengths that propel them forward. I mean, it's similar
Yeah.
to, oftentimes our greatest strengths are a byproduct of some form of childhood trauma in some way, right? Like people who are highly attuned to other people's emotions, often they grew up in environments where their parents or relatives were highly erratic, and so they needed to develop that as a survival mechanism. Kevin Hart, for example, attributes his quick-witted humor to being made fun of so much when he was smaller. So it ended up being a skill that he developed as a survival mechanism. So like we all go through tough times. That's why of course there are forms of trauma that are really difficult to recover from, and I'm not discounting those at all. There's a very real reality of that category. But generally speaking, I view those challenges and setbacks and the pain and suffering that I experience as a massive opportunity. And when I'm in those experiences, I obsess over the gold nuggets that can be picked up. What nuggets of wisdom can I pick up and carry forward so that when I come out of this opportunity, not only is it an advantage for me, but something that I can share with others so that they can hopefully learn from that wisdom without having to experience it themselves, which getting kind of meta is the whole point of this podcast anyway. So this is a perfect example of what we're doing it for. Bringing it back to your story, you began acquiring the short-term rentals. You saw that the space was saturated, and you set your sights on hotels. What did that transition look like into commercial real estate for you?
Yeah. Well, I think kind of when I was in short term rentals, so I left the military. I started working for this short term rental management company. And so we managed most of our properties in Colorado, and then there were a couple in a few other states. And it was at that moment when I was trying to run operations for this large company that I was like, there's a reason hotels do things the way they do them. Like there's efficiencies to be had by having a singular building or like properties that are close by. Whereas like we had a tough time building efficiency, and there's ways to do it. And like it was a fun obstacle to try to triumph. But at the end of the day, I was like, I think I want to buy a hotel because I love the boutique aspect of it. You can tell a story, which I think is really unique. It's hard to tell like a story about a specific short-term rental property, but a hotel you can give character, and so that's kind of a lot of what we focus around in our in our hotels is trying to figure out what that story is that we're trying to tell. But basically, I went to a couple of my partners. Some of them were actually owners of the short-term rental company, and I said, "Hey guys, I want to buy a hotel. Who's with me?" And a few of them were like, "No, we're kind of too busy with this stuff, with that stuff." And this one guy didn't really say much. And I felt like after he's like, "Hey, I'm in." I'm like, "Okay, sweet, let's do it." So that was February of 24, and so we're like, "Okay, what do we do?" And we just started like doing anything we knew. Let's source deals. Let's talk to brokers. Let's do whatever we can. Let's look on LoopNet and Crexy, and we basically looked for deals anywhere we could. And probably in a couple months of hard searching, underwrote tons and tons of deals. Finally found one. We're like, I think there's something we had here. Called the broker up, started having conversations, was able to kind of talk them down, work through some like creative solutions for buying the property, and then ended up purchasing it in August, September timeframe of 24. So it took us, I don't know what that is, maybe 5 months, 6 months to go from looking for a property to actually buying one. So I was like, it's not too bad. So yeah, that's kind of what it looked like at first.
That's awesome. And did you leveraged your experience from short-term rentals to get into the boutique hotel space? Obviously, did you have any contacts of people that you knew who were familiar with the space to help with the minor navigation points to go through?
I honestly didn't know many people. I'm part of a couple different masterminds, and one of them gave me a couple people to talk to. And so I chatted with those people, kind of provided broad advice. But I'm a real estate agent, so I didn't mind like representing ourselves. And then I think just having that short term rental experience and trying to carry that into the boutique hotel space. But my personal opinion is they're very different. We tried to take some of the things we learned from short term rentals. Me and my business partner are both in short term rentals in our personal portfolios, but I don't think they're as similar as people think they are. And I think there's way more, there's just way more upside to these boutique hotels if done correctly than you could ever get in a short term rental.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah, my background was in short-term rentals before getting into commercial real estate, and I was very fortunate. I partnered with people who were incredibly experienced. One of my partners, Neil, good friend of mine, he had over 25 years of experience, and I'm so incredibly thankful for that mentorship and guidance because you are right. It's like it's similar enough to short-term rentals that the concepts carry over, but in terms of the execution and the level of granularity and due diligence that you need in the process for stabilization, it's at a different scale and you're putting so much more capital at risk that you need to create those asymmetric returns, which is when you reduce that downside risk and you increase that upside return or the potential for the upside return. And the best way to do that is having people who know what they're doing. So yeah, I mean, it's massive. It's also a big reason why we ended up creating a community around it to drive people forward, because communities have changed my life. It sounds like you've been impacted by communities as well. At the end of the day, we're herd animals, and commercial real estate is a team sport. So yeah, that's awesome that you ended up finding that partner who was willing to dive into that with you and take that risk. And it sounds like there's obviously a massive payoff for you.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I didn't even realize I needed. I've done short-term rentals for a while. I would say by myself. My wife has helped, but she's not like actively involved. She's never wanted to be. And so I didn't really know going into like this big thing that I like how much I needed a partner. I just knew I didn't want to do it alone to kind of offset some of that risk. But man, my partner has saved my life so many times. It's so helpful just to have another person to throw an idea past and to like sanity check something. And so the right partner can make any situation so much better, and I feel like I can tackle way more because I have somebody to kind of bounce stuff off of. So yeah, I think partnership is huge, and having a partner with like way more experience would be incredibly beneficial as well. We didn't have that. We stumbled through it a little bit, probably more than we should have, but I think we knew what we were doing. We knew the numbers side well enough to add additional padding and to make sure that we weren't gonna lose our shirts off of it.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, so I had a fourplex that got me into the game. We converted each unit into short-term rentals, and we ended up learning there's one mistake in particular that ended up pushing back our deadline. So we did the full renovation within budget. I didn't know a single person in the STR space for any guidance. It was literally just shooting from the hip. My background's in engineering, so like I was very comfortable with the numbers, but in terms of the timeline and the way things like the time that things took and how to go about it, I ended up miscalculating and we ended up losing about $30,000. I mean, of course, the property ripped cash, so we were fine and we had enough capital to cover it. But it was in total one of these mistakes that pushed back the deadline. It was a $30,000 mistake. And thinking about that scaled up to boutique hotels, if it was a $300,000 mistake, like what would you pay to have somebody make sure you don't make that mistake? Make sure you don't make that $300,000 mistake. I would have totally paid somebody money to get us to our goal faster with the fourplex and save us $30,000. So yeah, that's a massive one. Okay, so what did for your first hotel deal, you identified it. What did the structure of the deal look like, and how did you go about raising capital, or did you just bring your own capital to the table?
Yeah, so we used an SBA loan. We were kind of looking at different loan options. There's a couple different SBA lending options we looked at, but we ended up going with what's called the 7A. And the reason we did that was because we wanted to finance the renovations into the project. So the 7A looks at projections of what we think the property will do after renovations, and then they'll lend on, a certain percentage of that. For this specific property, we purchased it at 2.4, and we did about K in renovations. And the stabilized value was something around, I think it was right around 3.4. So, there was, we have some equity in the property now. Hopefully we can continue to kind of push that up, not just based off of those projections, but the actual NOI. But what was nice is we really didn't have to bring much money to the table. What we ended up asking the seller for was them to carry an additional 2K. And that was just to kind of get a little bit better loan to value, because SBA doesn't really care about that money. They don't all they're looking at is what they have to lend on. And if there's additional seller financing kind of on the back side of that, or kind of in second or third position, depending on how you view it, they'll factor that in as kind of owner equity, or as in terms of loan to value. So we only ended up bringing in, I think we split the down payment, which was about 300K on this property. And it was me, my business partner, and then we brought in a silent partner who kind of just took some equity, not a whole ton. We didn't want to give away a bunch of equity. So our main goal was to really maintain operational control of this property and to not give away equity. And so it was nice to not have to really do a huge capital raise, especially going at this our first time. We wanted to take on that risk. We didn't want to bring other investors in and have to put anything on the line from their side.
Hey, quick pause here. If you're getting value from these conversations, it would mean the world to me if you took 10 seconds right now to leave a 5-star review. Each review directly helps us reach more people who can benefit from these incredible conversations. And if you're looking to buy a hotel or invest in one of our deals, or even if you just want to say, hey, you can send us an email at hello@thehuntforincredible.com. We'd love to hear from you. Now back to the show. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Okay, so what percentage? So it's $2.4 million. You put $500,000 into renovations. So let's just round up, call it 3 total, 2.9 million. What percentage was seller financed?
K of that. So
200K, so
what
like
is that?
7%.
Yeah, a little less than 10%. Yeah.
Okay. And then so that's 7% there. And then SBA, that loan, you have to put, is it 10, 15% down?
Yeah, it was something, it changes, depending on, I don't really remember the details of all that. It really got fuzzy towards the end, but, all in, we were about 125 each. So what does that equate to? 375, I want to say.
That's amazing. Yeah. People have this idea that you need massive amounts of money to finance deals, but you really just need to understand how to structure deals and how to get creative with them. Because even then, I have a buddy. He's a episode 57 where he raised private debt, so he owns
Hmm.
100% of the deal and didn't put a penny of his own money in. And I mean, the way he went about it it's very, very fun and creative. But yeah, I mean, you don't need insane amounts of money, and the upside is incredible. So I'm sure you guys had amazing operational improvements to add and capital improvements to add. What did that journey look like in terms of the levers that you pulled to add value to that property?
Yeah, that's a great question. We had kind of a fun situation happen that kind of lends into this, but we were supposed to close in August and had some issues with the SBA like anybody would. And we ended up having to push closing about a month, but we're like, wait, we want operational control of this. August is one of the highest months in this market. And so we're like, we need to figure out a way to take operational control. So we made a deal with the guy. We said, hey, we're not going to close, but let us take control. You don't accept any bookings after this. And so all we came in and did was add dynamic pricing. This guy was old. I think he's probably 55, 60, has owned the property for a while. And so he had this idea in mind, and he had actually brainwashed all of the employees to believe that like we don't go above this rate. This is the rate, and like we don't go above it because that's all this place is worth per night. And so we're like, no, let's add dynamic pricing. Let's take over. So in the month of August, we just pushed dynamic pricing out, us like a modified website, since we didn't actually own the property yet. And we like, I think we saw revenue increase like 20% just from that. So we made no like renovations inside the property at this point. All we did was change the pricing structure, and like that, brought us in 20% more than this guy's ever done. And so it was like,
Wait. I gotta break that down for me. So you guys didn't own the property, but you threw up a website for direct bookings and just
so
read the traffic, or what?
think of it like a management, like we came in and we said, hey, we're not going to, like, we're not, because we don't own the property, we don't have debt on it. But basically, we're just going to come in and we're going to act like we own it. That's basically all we did. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we just came in, we took down his website, we put up our website, we brought our PMS in, and then we brought dynamic pricing in. And so people were just booking at these new rates.
So you guys set up an agreement to manage the property beforehand, or was this part of you testing out the potential value before you put any capital at risk?
No, this was really just so that we could come in and capitalize on the summer months. He was like done with the property anyways, the owner. He wanted to go off and do his own thing. So yeah, you could say we basically managed the property. We didn't own it, but yeah, we came in and just took kind of ownership of it at that time, or management of it at that time.
Gotcha. And then when you went to purchase, was that leveraged against you in the negotiations? Was you like, oh, well, it's actually worth more now because you added the value already, or no?
No, he didn't know how much we brought in.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, we did something similar with the property that we closed on last year in Solvang, California, where it was run by a 90-year-old lady, and the way you would imagine a 90-year-old lady would run it. Incredibly kind woman, but just ran it like she ran it 40 years ago, and no dynamic pricing. And we added about 20-25%, literally, from having somebody at $20 an hour add dynamic pricing, add it to online travel agencies. So for those listening, like Airbnb and VRBO and stuff like that, and literally within a couple days added 20 to 25% value. And you can't do that in residential. You have to swing a hammer in order to add value in residential, because they're all based on comps. It's not based on the net operating income that's brought in. So that's amazing. Okay, so you guys already understood how to manage the properties. You added value to it. Tell me more about the story that you crafted, just touching on the value of the stories that we noted earlier.
Yeah. I think this is huge in kind of the boutique hotel space. What we wanted to keep the property's kind of original story there. The property is called the Adventure Inn. It had great SEO. We didn't want to like change the name, even though we didn't like love it, like it didn't vibe with us. But we really wanted to tell kind of a story about kind of the adventure traveler, kind of the modern traveler who's, coming in from Denver or some other large town in the area, maybe Albuquerque or kind of somewhere in Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona. Like we're a drive-to destination at the end of the day. And so we wanted to kind of craft, okay, what is our ideal guest avatar? What is like the muse of that person? And how does that inform kind of what we want the story of the Adventure Inn to be? And Durango is where the property is located, very outdoor friendly. I mean, that's what they've built their whole industry on. Basically, people coming to mountain bike or, run, hike, do all these outdoor things. And so we really wanted to hone in on that. And so a lot of it was trying to craft this story. And we even just got done with a 3-day video shoot where it's basically a couple that just wants to get out of the city. They want to go away for the weekend. And that's really what our ideal customer is. They're looking to basically just get away from the busyness of whatever they're doing and then kind of spend time in the nature and beauty that Durango has to offer. And so that's kind of the story that we've been telling and we'll continue to kind of tell and refine as we get further into the property. The marketing is such a huge piece in these boutique hotels, knowing how to craft that story, not knowing how to market, especially as the market changes away from some of these OTAs and more towards social media and other things kind of driving visitors to you or to your website. I think there was even, there's tons of changes coming, but I think there's some social media platforms that are even almost acting as OTAs now in terms of some of the software changes that they've made. Yeah, I think that's going to become a huge thing. And that's where marketing and branding is going to become just so necessary for a lot of these smaller independent hotels.
Yeah, 100%. So how do you actually, on a more tactical level, craft that story? So there's a couple that comes in, you do a couple day shoot. Is that chopped up into a mini series, or those independent reels that are captured and pushed and you tag other influencers that were part of it? What does that look like on a technical level?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both of those things. A lot of chopping some of those videos up and using those as kind of social media content, even just organic content, not necessarily like paid content, but you could use it for paid content. And then we have a longer video that will be made as well that can be kind of showcased in specific cases or in different areas. We could even, if we wanted to, we could run them on television in certain areas that actually may make sense. We've heard, kind of decent reviews from people that have told us like, yeah, we ran, a commercial in a tertiary market, or kind of a long form video in a tertiary market that's, still drive to, and ended up getting visitors that way. But I think a lot of it is going to be focused on cutting that stuff up and pushing that towards social media. And then the second piece of that is once you have kind of a strong social media brand, getting those influencers in, I think that it really is a very effective form. It's not always perfect. A lot of people try to like point one for one and say, if you have this many followers, you're going to get this. Like, that marketing is a mess. I mean, it's never going to be perfect. You're going to be taking a gamble some of the time. There are no guarantees with marketing, but you have to like still be present on the internet. And I think that's what's important. And then pushing reviews too. I know people talk about that all the time, but at the end of the day, that's like the single source of truth, you could say, as far as how well a property is: word of mouth from a guest. And I guess I'll just expand on that too. The hardest business to earn is repeat business, or is new business. Everyone's always competing for new business. So if you can focus on repeat business and referrals, you're not going to have to look to win new business. You have an opportunity now to take those guests that were with you and bring them back, or push them to tell their friends about how good the experience was. So that's kind of a big focus for us too. We don't really, I mean, yes, we want new business, but repeat business is a lot cheaper and easier to get if you could capture it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So tell me more about Durango and its proximity to major metros. Because you mentioned tertiary markets. I'm a massive fan of tertiary markets. How does Durango as a market, how do you think of it in terms of the marketing and what demographics and surrounding areas you target?
Yeah, most of our visitors, because it's on the southwest border of Colorado, we're getting a lot of visitors from Oklahoma and Texas. Those are our two major markets that were like North Texas, basically. So people from Dallas, and then, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Some of those areas is where we're getting a lot of traffic. And then we will get people from some of the larger towns in, like I said, New Mexico. So we get a lot of travel from there, but we do get a decent amount of travel from Denver as well. It's a pretty far drive. But I think one of the things we loved about Durango is some time ago, Durango decided they were going to just push, like the city of Durango was going to push so heavy into the outdoor centric market model. And so now, like, the city has done a tremendous job of just helping other towns like around there know just how outdoorsy Durango is and how many things there are to do there. And so it's pushed demand up a lot. And so I think that's been really helpful too, to have kind of the backing of the city pushing for tourism. So that's kind of off your question a little bit, but yeah, we're mainly focused on, you could say, like North Texas, Oklahoma, some of those markets. That's where we're getting most of our travel trends from.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on the trajectory of the market itself, because that's something that's often very underappreciated in terms of the value of that data when people are looking at markets. Very often people look at a market and they'll see snapshot of where it is, and they'll neglect seeing the trend of the direction that it's going. There are a lot of markets that investors, they see, like current owners in those markets, they're seeing the market trend downward, and so they try to get out, and that's why opportunities show up, and then newer investors get excited at those opportunities and buy in, and they look at the last year's numbers and they get all excited because they think they're buying it at a decent deal, but without realizing that it's actually a downward trend, and you could end up getting caught in a really bad situation. The market that we were looking at solving, we had a conversation with the county and asked them what their plans were. They were making big pushes for bringing new festivals into the town. They're really big towns, and an hour and a half away from LA. And they have these incredible festivals during Christmas. They have like gingerbread making festivals and these Danish festivals that are specific to Denmark. And we talked to them, and they're bringing in festivals specifically to smooth out the seasonality. And they're very strategic in terms of pushing the travel market there. And that was a big plus for us in terms of what it looked like. So finding a market where you tap into what the plans are with the city and how they think about marketing it, especially if you're planning to capture the demographic that's not traveling just for your hotel, but for the market itself, which is the majority of travel. Big win. All right, so
Yeah.
you purchased this property, you stabilized it. What did your journey to scaling into property number 2 look like?
It was accidental, to be honest. In that first phase, we were talking to a lot of brokers. We were looking for deals basically across the whole US, and kind of in the midst of that had interfaced with a broker that kind of came to us, what was it, November of 24, and said, hey, like, we got this property. We're having a really tough time selling it. The owner's in foreclosure. Are you interested? We're like not very far in this thing. And so I don't know, like, do we feel confident in like doing another deal? And we're like, okay, well, let's just go walk it. Like, it'll be fun. It's like right down the road from us, and it's local to us. And so we were really passionate about it. We want to do local stuff. We like contributing to like the local market. So there's a lot of efficiencies there. So we walked it and we're like, shoot, I think there's a deal here. And so we ended up going under contract, not confident about kind of what we had going, but confident enough to say, like, let's just keep doing some due diligence. And about 2 months in, numbers really just weren't lining up. We didn't feel we were going to have to take investor capital, and we just didn't feel comfortable moving forward at where the deal was at with investor capital. So we decided to back out of the deal. My business partner and I were set to lose a lot of money, and that was just kind of one of the things. It's like, okay, if you're gonna dabble in this game, you're gonna, at times not always make it. You might lose money. That's kind of the cost of doing deals like this. And so we backed out of that property, and let's see, about 2 months after that. So it was like January of 25 that we backed out of it. And in April, I get a call from some random number, and they're like, hey, you guys were going to buy this property. I'm the guy who foreclosed on the previous owner. Do you guys still want it? And I was like, man, we backed out. We felt pretty strong about backing out. And again, open-minded, we're like, okay, maybe let's throw like the worst terms at him for him and like the best terms for us. In what world does this make sense? So let's take $100K off the purchase price. Let's do an interest-only payment. Let's have him finance the whole thing. Like, none of it made sense for him to say yes. And he's like, okay. We're like, whoa, can't really like back out now. He didn't even like renegotiate. So we ended up, buying this property. He's like, his only condition was you buy it within 30 days. We're like, man, we did all the due diligence, I guess, in the previous, 3 months that we were going to buy it. So we ended up closing within 30 days, and took over a dumpster fire of a property. And that's a little bit of where we're at now. We're cleaning it up, and then we're currently working on, planning for a large renovation, the largest renovation we've ever done before. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at with that property. We basically kept it going for the summertime, and we're just easing into kind of the shoulder season and into the slow season. So we're trying to capitalize on doing renovations across the slow season.
Nice, that's awesome. What are some examples of the dumpster fire that you guys are tackling right now?
Well, so get this. When we first closed, the cops were there every day. The first employee we had, who was kind of a carryover employee, we're like, I don't know, she seems all right. Cops come in, they go to arrest her. She runs away. So we're like, what's going on? So there was homeless people sleeping in this property. There was something called the Cannabis Cabana, which is like this little ramshack shed outside, in which the homeless people used to basically just sleep. And it was kind of like this 420 friendly hotel where people could go in and smoke in there. But really just like everyone was just lighting up in there, even all the employees. There was literally like so much weed being smoked at the property that some of that stuff is budding. We had weed plants growing up kind of back behind our building. I didn't even know this was possible. I was like, isn't this stuff like hard to grow? But yet it's like growing in the middle of like this alleyway in Colorado. So that was kind of like what we were walking into. Basically, the cops were there every week. It was a lot of kind of pushing these homeless people out. It was known to just be a place like kind of a safe haven for homeless people. So that's a lot of what we had to deal with up front. And then the whole third floor had been destroyed. They tore it apart. They were planning to do some renovations. So we only had, of the 39 rooms, we only had, 2/3 of those actually open. So it was just a lot of cleaning up. How do we get rid of like the grime and just the grossness of the property, and how do we make it presentable to guests for the summer months, keep this thing going as so we can kind of buy some time so we can plan for renovation, so we can reposition the property, and kind of get all that stuff in place.
What did that capital structure look like?
For the purchase, yeah, so purchase, it was basically, we purchased for 1.9. Me and my business partner both just kind of split the 10% down payment on that. Is that right? Yeah, 10% down payment. Yeah. And then we did bring in a one partner just for some debt for some capital operating costs. And then what we're looking at doing, so we purchased that property for 1.9. We have another 1.9 we're going to do in renovations on the property. So right now we're trying to figure out that renovations piece. If we tried out a bunch of local lenders. It was really hard for them to see the potential in the property. Not necessarily see the potential. They saw the potential, but I think it was just really high risk because then the financials from the past few years have been really rough, especially since it was just foreclosed on. So right now we're looking at another SBA loan, kind of moving through that process. And then we'll probably bring in some investors for I think our investor capital will be about 400 or 500K.
Okay, nice. Throughout this journey, given the, like you're making it sound very smooth and like you're cruising through, what were some hurdles that once you were up against them, it maybe crossed your mind, is this a terrible idea? And then how did you get through that?
Yeah. Yeah, it was, I mean, for those that are listening, like it's never smooth. There's like never any guarantees. Costs always inflate. It's never as kind of as easy as people think it is, but I think that's part of the fun thing about it is you have to figure it out. I'm not an artistic person, but I am a very creative person. And so I love the opportunity to like figure out, you get stuck, you're stuck in a corner and you're like, how do I get out of this? And so even for the renovations piece of this, we originally thought we were going to do about $1 million in renovations. Turns out renovating 39 rooms to a decent standard costs more than $1 million. So we were just like, I guess we were using these residential assumptions of what we thought renovation costs were going to be. And the fact is, like, when you add everything up, when you're talking about, large scale renovations on the inside and outside, renovation costs are twice what we thought they would be. Now we're at 1.9 when you factor in kind of everything. And, some people could look at that and they'd be like, what am I going to do? Like, where am I going to find this money? But to me, I get kind of excited. Yes, there's a little bit of stress in there, but I get excited. Okay, this place is going to be sweet. I truly believe in what I'm doing, right? Like, I am so passionate about the space that we are going to create for guests and how this new hotel is going to go from a place where cops are coming in wondering if people are trafficked to a place where now the community is going to be proud that this is part of the city. And so that revitalization keeps me alive and helps me realize, like, hey, I have a chance to like create something really cool here. And so when I get trapped in a corner thinking about how am I going to get out of this? How are we going to raise this much money in, 30 days? It's one of those things that, like, this is such a cool project. Anybody is going to feel lucky to be a part of it. And I feel passionate about that. And so I can go sell that to people. I can go tell people, all about it and see where I'm going to get that money from. So I think going back to your question about like, what are some of those things or kind of, what does that look like? Some of those things are renovation costs coming in way higher than I expected. Timelines getting delayed. We had our renovations on the first property have taken a lot longer than we anticipated. They took about 2 months longer than we thought they would, and we still have some kind of things delayed. So, you just have to get creative on kind of working around some of those solutions. So I hope that was a good answer to your question.
That was a great answer. And there are a couple of things that I want to tease out that are really, really valuable. One is your disposition towards challenges. This idea that it's a puzzle to solve, a problem to solve and to tackle, because the most successful people I've ever met in my entire life, they view business and challenges like a game. And for some reason, when we grow up and we achieve adulthood, let's say, and we face challenges in the business world, the stress of, I speculate it's probably like the financial aspect for most people about them feeling like their livelihood is at stake, and it brings in fear, and all of a sudden it's not a positive game for them anymore. Now it's some adversarial obstacle to work through, and they work through it with pain and suffering when they could be working through it with excitement. And I totally get like the stress of not having money. Like, I've been there in times in my life, but the more we look at life like a game and the more positive it is, the better our outcomes are. And there's actually data behind this. This isn't hypothetical. Like studies show that when our minds are in a positive state, they are more creative, they think more laterally. And it's through that creativity, which is something else that you touched on, that we're able to come up with creative solutions. And it's those creative solutions in boutique hotels specifically that drive more revenue. So there's actual data behind how our mind in a calm, excited, creative state will generate more revenue and we'll have a more positive experience throughout it. The second thing that you said that got me really excited was your why behind it, where you're saying, I want this to be something that the city is proud of. And I want to create something valuable to give to these people because with a strong enough why, a man can withstand, or a woman, this is a quote that I'm quoting, a man or woman can withstand any how. And so the how of that pain and suffering is lightened from the disposition that it's a game, that it's a fun challenge. And then even when that challenge gets difficult, having a strong enough why to push through it is what makes all the difference. For me, it was I need to save my family in case I get hit by a bus. They'll still have something that I had left behind. So my why was much more negative pressure driving me forward. I'm happy to have shifted to more positive things. It's amazing that yours is positive for this one. But yeah, like looking at life as a game and having a positive why to push through those challenges is you can summarize how to be successful in business literally from just those 2 points exclusively. Exclusively. There's also another practice that I really, really love, which is removing your self-limiting beliefs. And the way that you do that is by asking yourself, what sounds impossible but would be fun to do anyway? What's a really big target that I can hit? And then how do I 10x that target and just have fun executing on it in a way where the execution and the journey is the fun part that you're enjoying. And then you have a strong why of hitting that big target that propels you and drives you through it. So absolutely incredible answer. I feel like if there's anything that people get out of this episode, it's the distillation of your experience into those nuggets of wisdom that are really cool that you shared.
Nice. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. And yeah, I think people need to realize that a lot of these like incredible things that people are doing, it isn't about like the end state of that being done, right? Like if I was just doing this for the end renovations and I missed or like I leaped over everything in between and all that struggle, the journey, I would miss like the fun of the enjoyment of the journey. And so there's so much to be not only learned, but like fun to be had within the journey of like even just waiting for the renovations to happen. I've got so many stories and learned so many things throughout that process. And that's like all of life. Life, you never know what life's going to throw at you. And a lot of it is just saying, I'm going to have, like we said in the beginning, a good perspective on whatever I'm going through. And I'm going to enjoy this journey. Like it's going to be fun. This is going to be a fun life. The end point of life is kind of irrelevant. It's all about, what does that process look like? Who am I becoming throughout that process? And is really like way more important to me and what I think everyone should focus on.
Oh, I love that. That's another bomb that you just dropped. That's another bomb. It's like the work isn't about the outcome itself. It's about who you become through the work. Yeah. That's absolute gold, man. That's absolute gold. All right. So here at the Hunt for Incredible, we believe that questions are the answer. So we always wrap up with this question. What do you believe someone needs to ask themselves to be successful in this space?
I think I come back to like the question of, do I believe in myself? Because I think you have to have a deeper belief that you can do it. And if you don't believe you can do it, then you might struggle with the various obstacles that might come up along the way. So I think that's the question.
I love that. And then taking that a step further, once somebody runs into the doubt and they don't believe in themselves, what are some things that they can do to push through that?
Surround yourself with people that do either believe in you or will push you to believe in yourself.
That's good. That's good. Environment is everything. We always think like it's natural for humans to think that we create our reality in a way where it's almost like we fabricate it. Like what is around us is, or like what's in our head is based on what's around us, almost like it's coming from us, which in some ways is partially true. But realistically, the best way to shape who you are and what you believe and how you think about things, how you think about business, how much money you make, is by changing your environment and changing the people that you're around. And like, I knew I could one day buy a hotel. Once I decided to buy a hotel, like, I knew that it was in my journey, but I didn't truly believe that I was the person who was ready to buy it until I started hanging out with the people who had bought it. And it was through hanging out with friends where they had multiple hotels that I became saturated in this idea of I am capable right now. Not just one day I'm going to do it, but I am capable right now. And that shift is what made all the difference.
Yeah, 100% agree. That's needed. You got to be in a good community.
Hell yeah. Jordan, this has been an absolute blast. We're going to have you back on for a round 2 once you wrap up this second renovation so we can pull some more nuggets of wisdom out.
Yeah, would love to. This was a blast. I had a good time.
Awesome. Thanks, brother. You take it easy. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.